Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first Issues and Insights legislative webinar of 2021. It's good to have you with us on this January morning. We will give everyone another minute to get settled and then we will kick off. But thanks again for being with us this morning.
John Paul, this isn't my advice, but I would say start meetings on time, and I always appreciate that you do that.
That is our goal.
Yeah.
Again, thank you for being with us this morning for the Minneapolis Regional Chamber Issues and Insights legislative webinar. We will get started in just a few moments. So if you still need coffee, run and get it, and we will be started shortly.
We share a home.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the January 2021 Issues and Insights legislative webinar. We're glad to have you with us this morning, and we have a great program. We're going to meet some of our new elected officials this morning. We have two of our new Hennepin County Commissioners, as well as two of our new legislators within the Minneapolis Twin West Chamber footprint, and we're going to get to learn more about their background and what they're looking forward to working on as they get underway this year. And then we'll have a short time for Q&A after that. We also have our legislator question this morning. And before we get to that, I want to make sure we thank our sponsors for this year. Our premier sponsor is CenterPoint Energy. Our sustaining sponsors are Goff Public, Weber Johnson, and Wells Fargo. And we greatly appreciate their support that make this programming possible. And we will have a poll question this morning. Victoria will launch it. And little foreseeing for everyone this morning, the question is, when do you think the Minnesota Legislature will pass a budget? A, early in the session, B, by the end of the session, or C, in a special session? And we'll see how optimistic people are feeling early in the year. Feel free to answer that question. Now we will get to our legislator and elected official question of the day, which is, what advice do you have for our newly elected officials as we kick off the new year and the 2021 legislative session? Some of you were freshmen not too long ago. Others of you have been around longer. So what advice do you have for our legislators? And this morning we will start with Senator Steve Swedzinski.
Thanks. Thanks, John Paul. And thanks for everything you do for the Southwest Metro. You guys are going to be drinking out of a fire hose. I never heard that expression in my life until I was elected to the state Senate. But the one bit of advice I can give any new employee anywhere is get to know the secretaries, get to know the custodians, get to know the critical staff that their job is to make your job easier. And so follow that advice and your first year will be much smoother.
Good advice. Representative Morrison.
Good morning. Thanks for doing this morning. This is fun. Boy, I guess first I would say enjoy the moment. It's a huge honor to represent your district and to serve the people of our state. I personally think it's healthy to have kind of a mix in the legislature of people who have been there for a long time and then some new voices. So with that in mind, I would listen to those that have been there and learn, keep your ears and eyes open all the time. But with that in mind, also be true to your values and your own voice. The place is about relationships, as Senator Swedzinski said. So get to know your colleagues. This is going to be challenging in this remote session, but do everything you can to get to know your colleagues on both sides of the aisle. and absolutely treat the incredible staff with deference and respect. They know more than most of us and do an incredible job to help that place run.
Thank you, Representative Morrison. Representative Joachim.
Good morning, everybody. I'm going to try to give, all this advice is fantastic and exactly what I was going to say. So I'm going to try to add something new. Be really intentional about developing those relationships with people. It's easy to do it when you're in session and in the Capitol building and around people that you can say hello to and get to know, but it's going to be a lot harder in this virtual world. So try to find a way to be really intentional, not just only to build relationships in the building, but outside of the building. So think about all those doors you knocked on and all that time you spent in your community, and make sure that you're still doing that and still listening, like Representative Morrison said.
Thank you, Representative. I'm just double checking here to make sure I didn't miss someone. And I don't think I did. So I think we're going to get into our first legislator. Senator Ann Johnson Stewart is with us this morning, and she has an event to get to, so I promised we would go to her first. So let me pull up her bio. Ann Johnson Stewart is a civil engineer who started her own engineering business in her basement over 2 decades ago, which grew into a flourishing enterprise with 31 employees. Ann is also a teacher. She taught for over 20 years, taught at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities and local technical colleges. Ann is a wife, a mother, a stepmom, and a grandma, and has worked hard to balance a loving home and family with the demands of business, teaching, and community involvement. Thank you for being with us this morning, Senator Ann Johnson Stewart.
Thank you, John Paul. It's nice to be here. It's nice to see some old friends. I don't know if you call 1.5 years old, but in comparison to how many new friends I've made in the last week, it's nice to see some old.
Well, thank you for taking the time. Yeah, thank you for taking the time to be with us. So your district represents Plymouth, Minnetonka, and I believe Woodland as well. But why don't we start out? Why don't you just give us a little, we read your bio, but why don't you tell us about yourself and your background?
So since this is a chamber event, I'll focus a little bit more heavily on my business background. So I am a civil engineer, and about just over 25 years ago, I started a consulting firm from this desk in my basement. We now have an office in St. Louis Park. We have 31 people, and what we do is construction inspection and materials testing on government funded projects. I also teach at the University of Minnesota. I'm not teaching this semester, and I'm not sure I will be able to teach again. Just because I really want to devote my time to the Senate. Another important thing about me from a business perspective is I have worked for the last probably 30 years on workforce development, specifically in the construction industry. So I have developed classes and training. I've gone around the state many, many times every year, training people how to fill a variety of roles in construction, whether they're testing materials or they're actually placing concrete or finishing it. I've also taught many, many design classes for the DOT, and that is something that I hope to continue. So one of my legislative priorities is to look for ways to bring work to all 87 Minnesota counties, and specifically related to the construction industry, because I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And I'm talking, well, that's enough. So that's who I am.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about why you decided you wanted to run?
So again, back to my civil engineering. About 2 years ago, the American Society of Civil Engineers evaluated, well, they came out with a report about 2 years ago. They actually had been working on this for a while. They evaluated all of the nation's infrastructure and gave it a report card. You may have read about this. In Minnesota, our report card grade was very low across the board on all of our infrastructure, ranging from transportation to water and sewer systems, airports, bridges, just about anything that a civil engineer would design. It became frustrating to me that even after the 35W bridge fell down, we could not retain momentum on supporting our infrastructure appropriately. We have literally billions of dollars in backlog just in Minnesota on infrastructure maintenance. This isn't even like new infrastructure. This is just making sure our sewer pipes don't leak. And really, I decided a civil engineer should be in the Senate. I looked around, there wasn't any, and was kind of elevated and asked to run. And so I did that. So my passion is on really making sure that people understand the importance of our infrastructure and why we need to maintain it.
Great, thank you. And
Mhm.
obviously you come in at a challenging time for the state for a number of reasons. Top of the list being obviously, hopefully we'll be managing out of a pandemic. Toward the end of session, obviously we still have a lot of challenges ahead, but when you look at this legislative session, what are your goals?
So I'm on both transportation and the capital investment committee. Frankly, one of my goals is to make sure that we are successful with the budget. Obviously, that's primary, but a personal goal for me is to see if we can do what Senator Bach has already talked about doing, and that's passing another bonding bill in an off year. I think when we fund and pay for infrastructure improvements at a state or federal level, we're really getting like a triple wallop. We're getting better infrastructure, we're putting people to work, but even more importantly, we're putting money into local economies. So we have water treatment plants and sewage treatment plants and roads and bridges around the entire state that need improvements and need maintenance. And when a contractor goes out there and does a project, they buy their materials locally. They pay for gas at the local gas station. They put up their employees in hotels. So I really will be looking at being a little bit inventive and seeing what additional bonding opportunities there are in 2021. That's one of my main goals. Then my other goal is just to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, you'll obviously have a steep learning curve, but it sounds like you are very well prepared for it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for being with us this morning. I know you have another event to go to, so we appreciate your time. And of course, we appreciate the engagement of all of our legislators, and we look forward to having that engagement from you as well. So thank you.
I'll stay on till 8 o'clock.
Fantastic. Thanks. Let me share my screen again here so we can introduce our next speaker. All right, we're going to go to Representative Frazier next. Cedric Frazier lives in New Hope with his wife Stephanie, their 3 daughters, and family dog named Puckett. Cedric grew up in a low-income working-class community in the south side of Chicago, where he witnessed firsthand what occurs when elected officials fail to properly craft policies that support the communities they are elected to serve. Cedric moved to Minnesota to attend school at the University of Minnesota-Morris. Cedric also received his master's from the Minnesota State University in Mankato in urban studies and his Juris Doctorate from William Mitchell College of Law. Cedric worked in the Hennepin County Public Defender's Office as a public defender. And today, Cedric works as the union side labor attorney for Education Minnesota, the largest labor union in the state. Representative Frazier, thank you for being with us this morning.
John, thank you, and thank you for the rest of the chamber for having me.
Yeah. Obviously, we touched on your bio just now. You have an interesting background. Why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you, like the bio said, I grew up on the south side of Chicago, and just a little bit about that. What inspired me, one of my biggest influences, was my grandfather. He's turned 85 this year. He is a retired former union leader. With this, he worked in a paint manufacturing company. He almost gave his life running into there were some busted pipes, and he ran back in to save some of his union brothers and sisters. And I come from that foundation of someone that was dedicated to his colleagues, dedicated to his work, dedicated to his profession. He also was a Grand Mason, and through his masonry work, he would conduct these community events every year during the time around back to school. He provide back to school backpacks and school supplies, and I was able to participate with him during that time. And it really kind of implanted on me the real need to give back to the community in whatever way that was. So the reason I'm here is because of my grandfather, the foundation he laid, what my family laid, and just the desire to give back.
When you thought about running for office, what were your motivations?
The biggest motivations, we were not yet in the midst of a pandemic, but what we did know about the state of Minnesota is that we have some great disparities. And it was those disparities that kind of pushed me toward running for office, because I saw it as a way for me to amplify some issues of communities that have not always been heard and that have not always had representation or voice to advocate for them.
And as you take office, it looks like you'll be on public safety and criminal justice reform. Obviously, another huge issue right now in the state of Minnesota. Talk a little bit about what your goals are on that committee.
Just a bit to tie it into, we're here with the chamber, and I will say, one of the reasons I wanted to get a law degree, outside of the fact that I could serve, was that it's more of an entrepreneurial degree, and it's kind of like a Swiss Army knife, and it would allow me to do several things and have several avenues to take advantage of opportunities. For the committees that I'm on, public safety. For one, we saw the great civil unrest that unfolded after the death of George Floyd this year. And for me, I think about one of the big things that happened with that was the harm that was done to many of the small businesses, particularly in areas like the north side of Minneapolis. So part of my work that I look to focus on is, how can we put policies and laws in place to create better relationships and better accountability for the communities and between law enforcement, so that we can ensure that civil unrest like that does not happen again, so those businesses don't have the same, are not impacted in the same way in the future.
You also serve on the education committee, and obviously that is clearly a passion for you given your work background. What about goals and hopes there?
Huge passion. We're in the midst of this pandemic, and I can personally account for the tough times and the difficulty it is to be a full-time working parent and at the same time doing distance learning with your young children. But what I also know is that not all families have the same opportunities and the privilege that I have. I'm working from home, my wife and I, so we have the ability to spend some time with our kids to work on that. And what we're really looking at when we go into the session is, how do we make sure we put some equitable policies in place and a budget in place too, where we can make sure the kids that may have been in those opportunity gaps before the pandemic are going to be able to come out of that in a better position and be able to catch up or be ahead of where they were before we went into this pandemic.
Great, thank you. And why don't you tell us, I forgot to mention this off the front with you, but tell us a little bit about your district.
My district is about half of Crystal, almost a majority of the city of New Hope, and in the eastern part of Plymouth.
Okay, great. And obviously both your committee assignments touch issues that are important and that you care a lot about, but when you think about this legislative session, are there any other issues or goals you have going into it?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, right, we're still in the midst of this pandemic. It's a budget year, and I think many of my colleagues are going to talk about this, and as well as the commissioners. How do we make sure that we get the resources that are needed to the communities that are impacted the most? And how do we make sure that we get the resources, particularly for small businesses and businesses, how do we make sure we get them the resources they need so they can come out and still be viable once we get through this pandemic?
Great. Well, thank you. We appreciate you being with us this morning. Your predecessor was a staple at these events, so we look forward to hopefully seeing you as well.
Absolutely.
So thank you. Now we will move on to our two new county commissioners, and we will interview these two together, so it'll be a little different. So thanks everyone for bearing with me this morning as we work through everything. Jeffrey Lundy is one of our new Hennepin County Commissioners, representing a district that covers Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center, and he can correct me for the communities that I've missed outside of that. Jeff has lived in Brooklyn Park since 1998 with his wife Jody, their two sons. Jeff has worked in the computer technology industry since 1995 and also spent 3 years teaching computer technology at Hennepin Technical College. Currently, Jeff serves as the mayor of Brooklyn Park. During his time as mayor, he has been able to unite the community by listening attentively to its needs and by working tirelessly to fulfill those needs. Now, Jeff will apply his talents of listening and acting to Hennepin County. And we also have Chris Latendresse with us, whose district represents my home in Long Lake, but also part of Edina, Minnetonka, and a large portion of the Lake Minnetonka communities. Chris Latendresse is vice chair of the Hopkins School Board and served in the Obama administration at USAID. He has deep roots in our community, growing up and raising his family in Hopkins. Chris ran for Hennepin County Commissioner, District 6, because he believes we need good government now more than ever, and that the path to better government starts with us. So Jeff and Chris, thank you both for being here this morning.
Thank you.
Very grateful for the opportunity.
Yeah, you're both welcome. I will start with both of you as we did with our legislators, and starting with Chris, maybe you go first. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, you bet. Well, just thank you to the Minneapolis Regional Chamber, Twin West Chamber of Commerce. I know you all have recently gone through a merger. I've always thought of you as the Twin West Chamber of Commerce because actually you helped set me on my path to public service. I was funded, my college education was funded through a Twin West Chamber of Commerce scholarship back in the day. So my roots in the community are deep. My mom was a public school teacher in Hopkins. I'm a product of Hopkins Public Schools, and really saw public service as a path to giving back and serving to serving our community. So that's really where my entire professional background has been. So that, most recently, the bio's a little just outdated as of 2 weeks ago. I used to be a vice chair of the Hopkins School Board, where, I served the community that raised me. Lived and worked in Washington, D.C. for about a decade, including serving in the Obama administration at USAID. I actually worked on a particular area that was a public-private partnership between government and the private sector around global food security called Feed the Future. And I really learned the power when government can come together with the business community to unleash potential for folks. We, through Feed the Future, were able to put some money on the table from the government, but through that unlock, I think, $3.5 billion in private investment for global food security. That was then unleashed for, I think, like 17 million in agricultural sales and lifted 25 million people out of poverty. And so I really do see, it's not an either or. When government works together with the private sector, there's a great deal that we can accomplish for our communities.
And Jeffrey, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Yeah, so I represent the cities of Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center, Osseo, Crystal, New Hope, and Robbinsdale. And so previously spent 14 years on the Brooklyn Park City Council, 10 of it as mayor, very active with business development. I always tell people just drive 610 and then there you can see my work, trying to bring good business in. But it was a night job. My day job, I spent about 25 years in technology. I worked for Dell and Microsoft and some other local technology companies. About half my career was spent actually international sales. So most of it was spent in Japan, but also through South America and some in Europe. And so very experienced with that. And I think, my focus this last year has been, as mayor, was the most craziest. We had people who wanted to voice their concerns about a social justice system that was failing. We had the clearly what everybody saw in the video on the what happens when officers misuse force. And so rightfully people, lots of questions. And then we had COVID. And so it was never my plan to run for county commissioner. And then Commissioner Opat decided not to run. We had a conversation, decided to run, and then immediately COVID and some of the civil unrest occurred. And so I questioned my sanity at times for that whole decision to do all this at once. But I think it's important for me in COVID is really, COVID breaks down two ways. Are you getting a paycheck? If you are, things are okay. If you are not, things are not okay. And I think that's part the biggest challenge right now is it really breaks down very simply. I was blessed, my day job, I was able to continue work from home. My neighbor, not so blessed. He lost his job. And so I've always remained that focus that COVID affects people differently, not only on the medical side, but economically. And if you have kids, and if you have the ability to help your kids do well in school, you are different than people who don't have that ability. So I'm trying to take that idea that we're not all affected by COVID the same way.
Yeah, thank you. And you touched on it a little bit, but county government touches, the people's lives, I think, a lot more than most people realize. So Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about why you wanted to run for county commissioner?
Yeah, let me first just touch briefly on my motivations for public service writ large. And there's a few different points of entry to this, but when I think about what's happening in Washington, D.C. right now, where we're actually seeing in full, vivid, living color, just how important our institutions are, just how important our democracy is, but but also how fragile it can be. The genesis of that realization for me actually started at a pretty young age. I mentioned I grew up in the West Metro, but when I was 10 years old, my sister was 8. My folks actually took a 4-year hiatus to do service work internationally. My family moved to Russia in the fall of 1993. And we landed in Moscow in the middle of a constitutional crisis that turned into an armed conflict and a conflict between a president and his parliament. And to see what happens when, number one, it reinforced for me at a very young age, our institutions are fragile. We have to protect them. And number two, when our institutions fail, people get hurt. We are not able to create a context where people can thrive. I actually have this photo here of my sister and I in front of the Russian House of the Parliament after those 3 days of conflict. And so it's been a little eerie watching what's happening in Washington, D.C., the neighborhoods I lived in, just a block from the Capitol, seeing it's not apples to apples, but it's echoes of what I experienced as a 10-year-old. And I think it's incumbent on all of us, certainly those of us in public leadership, but really any of us who is a member of our community because we own a business or participate in a business. It's really incumbent on all of us to figure out the kind of future we want to walk into together. I'm excited for the opportunity, just very briefly, specifically the county board and why I wanted to run. I mean, as a school board member, as a vice chair of the Hopkins School Board, it became very clear very quickly as we were interfacing with families at their greatest point of need, which is the education of their students in many cases. The needs that so many of them experience as families start far before they walk through the doors of our schools. And county government is just a place where we're able to really meet those family needs at a much greater level. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And Jeff, you touched on this a little bit, but talk to us more about your motivations to run.
Yeah, as I said, I didn't start the year planning to run, and so, but one of my passions, probably one of the most big things, is I want to get the blue line done, hands down. I am a very results oriented person. Not talking about stuff and not getting it done is not getting it done. That's a fail. So I have low patience. I am all focused on what do we do. I don't care people's political parties. I don't care their backgrounds. If people will work, I will be there hand in hand with them and push them things. And so the blue line is important. It will provide access to affordable transportation. Many of the Northwest suburbs are homes to people who experience poverty. Also, access to transportation allows us to compete globally because we're not in a market. We're not competing against North Dakota, South Dakota, Wisconsin. We're competing against China. We're competing against Japan for investment. And so we do that by having a transportation system that looks like what they're used to seeing. And so it's vitally important. I also, as mayor for 10 years, Brooklyn Park, the most diverse large city in the state, just giving voice to different communities and doing I'm a fan. My staff who's with me is all engagement people. We are going to be out talking to people. The two most popular questions I get, and it sticks with me, is what does the county do and what the hell does the county commissioner do? And it went exactly like that. And so I think that really speaks to the fact that we need to be out there more. We need to talk to people and make sure that the taxpayers feel like they're getting value and that people who need help feel like people are listening. So
thank you. And for our attendees, we will have time for questions, obviously. So if you want to start dropping them into chat, I will try to monitor those as we go through. Obviously, Senator Johnson Stewart had to go to an event. If Representative Frazier is able to stick with us for a little bit, I think we can feel free to ask questions to him and then our two county commissioners. And back to Chris, when you look at your first year as a county commissioner, what does success look like?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think some of my top priorities are well aligned with the Minneapolis Regional Chambers. When we talk about mobility, affordability, and workforce, the leadership assignments that I've been entrusted by my fellow commissioners to serve in, I'll be serving with Commissioner Lundy on public safety. I'll be the vice chair of public safety. This will be formal as of Tuesday, but I will be the chair of the Hennepin Housing and Redevelopment Authority, which housing and affordable housing and its intersections with homelessness is probably my top issue. And I really do think I've said along the way that I believe we need a Minnesota Marshall Plan for affordable housing, for workforce housing, where we actually match public resources in partnership with the private sector to match resources commensurate with the need. We've got some of our partners over in St. Paul on this call. I say, a year from now, if we can bond $100 million for housing, why can't we bond $200 million? And let's figure out how to get that done together. The other thing that I'd like to tout and just extend ourselves as an open door to anybody on this call is, since the pandemic started, Hennepin County has been on the front lines of stewarding and administering a lot of the federal small business grants. We've administered, I think, $44 million in small business relief. Right now, we're actually in a new cycle of grants that's open right now. The deadline is January 14th, and that's been made possible through our partners, not the federal government, but in St. Paul. It's another $25 million in small business grants. And John Paul, maybe you can send around both Commissioner Lundy's and my staff's and personal contact information to the group. The offer I'd make to you is, number one, if you need any help whatsoever navigating that small business grant process, please be in touch with us. We are here to serve you on that. And number two, maybe you've gotten one of these grants in the past. Maybe you haven't gotten one of these grants in the past, either because the process has been cumbersome or there's been some eligibility stuff. Listen, we're not perfect. I'm all about continuous improvement. We need your feedback in order, if we are so fortunate as to see more support from our partners at the federal government or maybe even the state level in the future, the feedback you give us now can make it better in the future. So please be in touch with us.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. And I should mention as well, the Chamber's been working with the county over the last couple months to implement a program to assist businesses in the county with CARES Act funding. And it took a huge effort to get that online before the end of the year, but we now have over 200 businesses that are getting technical assistance who need it coming out of the pandemic. So you're right. It's there are a lot of resources out there that the county can help our businesses with. Commissioner Lundy, you as well. What would you call success for your first year as a commissioner?
Well, I think this year is all about COVID. Slice it up any way you want to. It's about helping people stay in homes, stay in their apartments by providing assistance. It's about landlords who they can't pay their bills if their tenants aren't able to pay their bills. And many landlords are doing everything they can to work with their tenants. So it's not an adversarial relationship. They're in it together. They need each other. And so making sure that we can do that to keep people in housing, provide that security, provide businesses. And, I would actually challenge back to the chamber that one of the big challenges, it's the micro and small business owners don't have that paperwork experience. They don't have these books where they can provide proof of revenue and profit loss and those kind of statements that we in government like to require for people to get loans. And so I think one of the challenges for the county is to try to make that process simpler to use, easier for people to understand and apply for, so that they're not falling through the cracks simply because they don't have a QuickBooks report that they can run and show profit loss, those small micro businesses. One of my staffers that starts on Monday, Anna, comes from NEON, Northside Economic Opportunities Network, where she's done work providing technical assistance. So our focus is really to help people navigate that system, provide information so that money is going to people who really need it. I think a lot of people don't apply because there are things in there that preclude them from doing things. And it's helpful. I mean, most small businesses are started by people of diverse backgrounds. And those small businesses tend not to have a finance department that can print off reports and provide information on the fly. So I'm hopeful of that. And I think the other thing I'll quickly mention is, public safety I'm heavy in my committee assignments. I'm chairing the public safety committee, also chairing the criminal justice coordinating committee. And so I think this year we know that we have a trial, and we know people are going to want to use their First Amendment rights to voice their concerns, and we support them. And so threading that needle correctly at all levels will be a focus for everyone, not just Hennepin County, but the suburbs, the city of Minneapolis, to make sure that we protect people's rights, but also protect people's rights to property and businesses. So it'll be a challenge, but that's okay. That's what we were elected to do.
Yeah. And this question for both of you. Chris, you can start it first. Obviously, the county board, if you just look at it by political party, is not super diverse, which presents, I think, opportunities and challenges for both of you from different perspectives. How do you look at kind of the political realities of the county board in terms of how do you specifically try to get things done? Because it doesn't necessarily make it easier to be part of what I would call the majority, even though it doesn't work that way in a county board.
Yeah, I'll jump in first, just because it's the order we've been going on. Listen, I ran as a Democrat. I am a Democrat. I'm a proud Democrat. That said, one of the things that I love about local government is, number one, I do think that more than ever before, not just when times are challenging, but people are looking to nonpartisan local government to model and provide the kind of leadership that they deserve from government, period, across our levels of government. And I think the unique opportunity here is that local government is not a legislature. It is not sufficient to just sort of cobble together a ideological or partisan majority or whatever, and get to the 50% plus one that you need in order to ram your agenda through. That represents a failure, a breakdown of local government. Local government functions best when we build relationships on a board of equals, a small board, to figure out how to move together. And it doesn't mean that we will always agree, but my bias, and I've told my other commissioners this, even as we've tried to figure out how to set up, some of our committee assignments and leadership structures. Don't come to me asking for help to get to the fourth vote. If you need my help getting to the fourth vote, I'm going to ask you, how do we get to 5 or 6 or 7? Because I think it's really an important signal to our community when we're able to govern united across our differences.
Thank you. Commissioner Lundy.
Yeah, I would say, I'm significantly disenchanted with the party system. I've always told people that I just don't care. But what matters is personal relationships. And if you have personal relationships, you will get way more done on that. I've told my county commissioner, I told Chris, you know what, in the day, my job is, we may disagree, but next week I might need your vote. So you will never see me say, you know what, this is it. I can never work with Chris again. And so we're going to work together, small groups like this, and you think of some of the challenges that the city of Minneapolis has. It is all one party. So the idea that somehow one party makes for this kumbaya and everybody's together is false. And so I think it really comes down to personalities, getting people together who want to intentfully work on stuff. I'm excited. I've been, the whole month of December, I know Chris probably feels the same way, and so is Kevin. We spent the time with our 4 county commissioners and incumbents helping us, answering questions, because they want us to be successful, because we are succeed as a team. We fail as a team, we succeed as a team. There is no 4-3 success or failure. So I'm excited, because I think that people feel like they're mission focused, and it's kind of empowering to work with a team like that. And so I'm excited. I looking forward to the opportunities to agree and disagree and to move everyone forward.
Thank you. And sticking with you, Commissioner Lundy, you did touch on this, but you'll be chairing public safety, and you'll also be serving in a criminal justice capacity. Talk a little bit about that. How has maybe your time as mayor prepared you to do that?
Yeah, I think I don't want to say unique perspective, maybe just a little different perspective, but for the last 10 years, I've been working with the Obama Foundation, President Obama, then the Obama Foundation and Cities United. I'm trying to lessen the impact of violence on young males of color, especially, but also try to make the system so it's transparent. And so we try to lead and not just say, okay, hey, here's what we should do. We want to be the people helping write that. And so we have work to do. And so I know from my time on the Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee, there are people who actually want to do things, and we'll need help from the legislature, because we're in it together. There are things that state laws and we need to change, and so tackling that has been a challenge. But Brooklyn Park, with our diversity, and our diversity is diverse. I always used to tell people that, and so making sure that people have trust, and they may not agree, but trust and agreement are 2 separate things. I may not agree with somebody, but I may trust them, and so we worked hard at Brooklyn Park to make community policing our model. Does that make us perfect? Absolutely not. But as long as you're always working toward perfect or that, and also keeping an open ear to the idea that there's some areas of improvement. And so I look forward to work with everybody because it is a community project. And that means all electeds, community leaders, to really have a system that people feel is just and fair, which many people don't feel right now.
Yeah. Thank
John,
you.
if I could just add, I think, for the, all three of us have come out of local government. I'm coming from the city council in the city of New Hope. And that piece, the nonpartisan piece, I do think it plays a big part into getting things done at the local level. But I'll say at the foundation, though, at the core of anyone that is in public service, it should be about, because you care about people and you believe that government, and through government, you can make the lives of people better. I hear Commissioner Lundy speaking to some of that in some of the comments he made. In Brooklyn Park, absolutely one of the most diverse cities in this state. And I see the work that he's done there. And I'm glad to hear that he's the chair of the Criminal Justice Reform Committee and Public Safety Committee for the commissioners, because I'm the vice chair at the state level in the committee on the House side. So I'm looking forward to working with you on these issues and moving forward. But just to say that, yeah, I joined government because I believe government should make lives of people better. And that shouldn't matter regardless of what your political philosophy is. What I always say to people is that whether I'm in the metro and I'm dealing with disparities, those same disparities are in greater Minnesota. Yep. And so it should not matter what your political philosophy is. What at the end of the day, what it should be about is, how do I help those people that need help the most? How do I make their lives better? And so that's why I'm here to serve. Thank you.
And Commissioner Latendresse, you spent time obviously on school board, hyper local. You've also served in the federal government. What lessons do you have from either of those that you think you can apply now to the county government?
Yeah, I touched on them already, but just to crystallize it, now, from my experience in the federal government, it's that people think of large government and they think of bureaucracy. My experience is, and they also sometimes think government can do it all, particularly on my side of the aisle. Government can't do it all. There are limited resources. There are always tough decisions to make about priorities. But we can do way more when we don't just think about it as, well, it's the government's job to do X. It's why my philosophy, and I'm really excited to just figure out where these points of partnership are with the Minneapolis Regional Chamber in particular, is, where can government and the county bring our piece? Where can our business community bring its piece? Where can, civil society and our community-based organizations and our faith communities bring their piece? And together, the whole is much greater than the sum of its parts. You really can do more when we figure out how to do it together. In local government, I sort of said it already. It's just it doesn't work. It's sort of like if you're on a board for a nonprofit, or if you're on the board of a company. Like, what company can survive a meeting after meeting after meeting of closely contested, divided votes? I understand that that's how we have to do things in the legislature. We have this two-party system. It's much more, it's just how it's set up. There's a lot more people, there's reasons for that. But on a small board in local government or in our businesses, nonprofits, it just doesn't work when we are at each other's throats that way. And I think there are lessons in that, actually, for our partners across government. I think all of our government would look better if it functioned more like our city councils, our school boards, and hopefully, God willing, the Hennepin County Board.
Thank you. I do want to try and get to a couple questions here, and I apologize. Both these questions I feel like are probably more for Representative Frazier, so I don't want to put you on the spot, but I will ask you the questions, and if you don't have an answer, that's okay for this morning. The first one is, what can be done to help the skyrocketing cost of prescription drugs? This is the fastest increasing cost of my insurance premiums.
One thing is, there was a bill introduced just yesterday working on setting up a system where we can negotiate the prescription drug prices to have a better rate typically for our residents in the state of Minnesota. And when I campaigned, I talked about finding ways to put legislation in place to where, if you had a pharmaceutical company that was producing and selling their prescription drugs for a lower price anywhere else, I don't care where it was, that they would have to sell it for that price here in the state of Minnesota. if they are servicing folks here in the state of Minnesota. I mean, in my community alone, I have a sizable population of those that are living in long-term care facilities, and they're also on fixed incomes. And this was a big topic of conversation during my campaign. And I promised that I would work as hard as I could to make sure we could find a way to make sure prescription drugs are affordable. But I think that is what it is. It's working with those pharmaceutical companies, making sure we can put incentives in place to make sure we drive those costs down.
Thank you. And here's the second question. And theoretically, all three of you could answer this, but I'll direct it to Representative Frazier. What are you doing to lower taxes and stay competitive with states that have found a way to finance their state without taxes? Perhaps they mean personal income taxes. We need to make sure companies / people are incentivized to stay in Minnesota. Once they leave, they will not be back. We need to be proactive on educating people about the importance of taxes on businesses, which are people and individuals. I love that you were talking about relationships, because that is how we as business owners have built our businesses.
Well, I think you're always trying to look at ways, when you want to look at ways that are going to lend to recruitment of folks into the state and also retention of folks into the state. And I think you always want to keep options on the table of how you can do that. But I think one of the most important things is Minnesota is known for, our great outdoor environments, many of the services that we provide, and none of those are free. And I think we have to understand that if we want to continue to provide those, we have to make sure that we can fund those and have the resources to fund those. So I always say, absolutely look for opportunities, a way that we can ease burdens, if that is what we're talking about here, and the concern is here, and not wanting to push businesses away, and particularly our small businesses, but at the same time making sure we maintain the level of services that we have that are ranked as some of the best in the country. I mean, we don't get ranked as number one and number two and in the top 10 livability and in all those areas because we don't provide those services. You take those away, and I think we're going to be looking at a total different situation for the state of Minnesota. And I think we always want to keep that in mind when we're talking about, particularly when we're talking about how we fund those services.
Yep. Hey, John, if I could jump in just for a second on this, having competed with countries all over the world, one thing about a competition is you highlight different things, and having a transportation network, having a workforce that's educated and flexible and highly technical, having the ability to train new workers, so that this new industry coming in, Takeda pharmaceutical industry is new to Minnesota, that biopharmaceutical. So having those abilities to do that is important. But I also think that I think the question was asking, small and local businesses, what can we do to kind of remove burdens and challenges from their things? I think some of the regulatory stuff that all of us do is something we should examine and look at, because a lot of the new businesses are going to be from people from diverse backgrounds. They tend not to have access to capital and programs that help them to elevate their business. So I think where we can find ways to work together to alleviate things, we need to do that. Especially with the COVID economy. COVID has reset so many things.
Yep, that is true.
John Paul, can I jump in really
Yep.
quick on this one
Yep.
too, just briefly to say, I think it's significant that the Minneapolis Regional Chamber has selected affordability, mobility, and workforce as its three priority areas. All of those represent public-private partnerships. All of those represent investments. I think all of us believe that if we invest in those things well, there's actually a return on that investment, that it's not $1 in, $2 out. It's $1 in, 10 more dollars in, if we do it right. And I think the other thing is, as I think about local government and the difference between local government and state government and federal government is, maybe not our partners in the state, but especially the federal government, we have to balance our budgets. We can't print more money to plug holes. And, here in Hennepin County, a chunk of our revenue comes from property taxes. Everybody's well aware of that property tax bill. I hope that this year, a lot of our residents, we had a 0% increase. A lot of our residents may have actually experienced a slight decrease in their property taxes. And I think it's important for people to know that, Hennepin County is a $2.5 billion layer of government, but for each point of increase in property taxes that we levy, it only generates $8 million in revenue for the county, which on a $2.5 million budget ain't much. So the thing I try to convey to my friends who are both concerned about their taxes is like, listen, we're doing the best we can to provide as friendly a context for your property taxes. That said, we've got to be able to fund these investments. To my friends on the other side, I say, listen, like we cannot, even if we were to raise property taxes to 10%, God forbid, like which we're not going to do, by the way, we cannot property tax our way into the kind of changes that we need to make in county government to deliver services for people. We have to be innovative. We have to pursue partnerships. We need help from our federal and state partners. We can't just tax our way into the solutions we need to move forward into together.
Thank you. Another question that came in, this is for Representative Frazier. What is one thing you will do to reach across the aisle during this pandemic session?
You know, one of the toughest things, and I think folks have touched on it earlier, is that we're in the middle of a pandemic and we're not there with each other. So for me, it's about being intentional and reaching out to folks that I don't have a relationship with to build those relationships. And I think I said it earlier, the same issues that impact folks in my district are impacting folks in districts around this state. So it's imperatively important for me to make sure I connect with my fellows representatives and also folks in my own party. They're in different parts of the state. And there's different philosophical beliefs in those parts. We may be under the same umbrella of the DFL, but we may have different ideas about how we want to get to certain areas. So it's important that we connect because these issues are impacting us all. And we should be moving legislation forward to help those people that need help the most. Thank you.
Eric Myers put this question in the chat earlier. I'll direct it to Commissioner Lundy, but welcome both Commissioner Latendresse and Representative Frazier to answer as well. Mayor Lundy implemented a community policing program in Brooklyn Park with a commitment to data analytics. Can you speak about how that might be useful for Hennepin County, even as a model for Minneapolis?
Yeah, I think there's two parts of data analytics. One is that it provides us to focus resources. I mean, in Brooklyn Park, we lowered crime by 40%, and we didn't arrest our way out of it. We actually spent most of our resources were spent on giving kids access to after-school activities, trying to find root causes, mental health, addiction issues. So it wasn't arresting people that got us to lower crime. It was actually trying to tackle the root cause of that. But I also think analytics is important for transparency. And so Brooklyn Park was the first suburb to actually release their Crime Stop data by demographics. So we put it all out there so people could see it. And so as we collect information, we want to make that available to the public to see. And that's one of those pillars of trust, is that they should know everything we know. They should be able to find the data, and we should be front and center. And that way, if we find areas that we need to do better on, we can start to metric that solution. Are we doing better? I think frankly, it's a right of any resident to say, here's the data, you released it. Have you done something to make it better? And so I think that's the two pillars of analytics, is to guide your actions and also to build trust by being honest with residents.
Well, I think Commissioner Lundy is accurate on that. I think that is important. But I think also we know we have disparities. We know that there are communities that have overrepresentation in the contact and the disproportionate negative contacts and interactions that they have with law enforcement in our public safety community. So we know that already. So some of the things we need to do, and I think Commissioner Lundy touched on this, is how do we put resources in places to get to the root cause that are causing those interactions, right? And I think when you do that, you will start to see those, you will see that data start to shift, and you'll see better outcomes. So we'll be looking at things in our committee, and we'll be looking at things in the legislature of how we can use that data to focus those resources. And then also make sure that those resources are the resources that need to go into particular targeted places, so we can change the relationships between those public safety and law enforcement individuals and get the community resources that they need to attack those root cause issues that are causing much of disparities.
Yeah. And John Paul, if I may add one thing, because I think the last question plays into this question. If we can prove that investments in areas that people don't think about as being crime prevention, addiction treatment after school, actually lowers crime, then suddenly we have the data to prove that these investments matter. and that we can
Yeah.
start talking about the allocation of money. And so I think that's one of the big things about tax value is do people feel like they're getting the value? And if we can prove that things are working, it becomes easier to say we need to invest more. And here's the proof, you know.
Yeah, and I think where a lot of that work will be led out of the county, and Commissioner Lundy and I have just been sitting through 3 days worth of 1 hour briefings with each of our individual lines of business. So folks that want to go into the Hennepin County org chart, that's at a level of detail that maybe you don't want to know, but it's actually a fascinating way to actually see just the breadth and scope of everything the county does. I mean, we touch just about everything, but one of our unique lines of business that's a relatively new one is our disparity reduction line of business. And it's a line of business where the leaders there, it's actually where our Center for Innovation and Excellence is, where a lot of our data stuff happens. It's meant to be cross-cutting, sort of a matrix model across all of our other lines of business in terms of figuring out how we do disparity reduction. Because we know, I mean, when I think about Minnesota, like I agree with the promise of one Minnesota. It's who we are, it's where we need to go. But there are also two Minnesotas. We know, the Minnesota that I inherited was, Time Magazine, Governor Wendell Anderson, The Fish, The Good Life in Minnesota. Minnesota is uniquely positioned nationally to deliver on promises for its citizens because of our dynamism of our private sector and, good government and that legacy. But that's only half the story. And the other half of the story is that we are among the worst in the nation for our communities of color. And, it's for me, it's a question of not how do we bring the Minnesota promise, that good legacy of good government down. It's how do we make sure that every single Minnesotan, every single Hennepin County resident shares in the promise of Minnesota as I experienced it from the time I was born in Methodist Hospital in St. Louis Park. And that's really our test in government.
Yeah, thank you. And I think we're going to end there. And so again, I just want to thank Commissioner LaTendresse, Commissioner Lundy, Representative Frazier, Senator Johnson Stewart. Thank you so much for being with us this morning, giving us the opportunity to get to know you better, your priorities, what you're hoping to work on. We love having the engagement from our elected officials. So we hope to see you in the future, and obviously want to make sure that we continue to have a great relationship with all of you, and wish you the best of luck in your first year. I want to touch on the poll question again that we asked earlier, which was, when do you think the Minnesota legislature will pass a budget? Early in session only got 6%, so we're a little bit pessimistic. But 50% of you thought that we would do it by the end of session, and 44% of you are the true pessimists who think this will happen in a special session. So I guess that's our charge to our legislators there, is to prove that 44% wrong. Let me share my screen again here. Just wanted to highlight a couple events that are coming up. We have Government Affairs Forum for the Minneapolis Chamber next week, where we'll be doing a preview of the legislative session that just started. Breakfast with the Mayors, which is an annual event that the Chamber does with our mayors of Minneapolis and St. Paul. It's at the end of the month. Great event. And then for South Metro, Bloomington Chamber, their public policy series, will be talking to their local legislative delegation at the end of the month as well. Those are 3 different great events that we have coming up. So thank you for being with us this morning. Our February Issues and Insights Legislative Breakfast will feature Melvin Tennant, who's the president and CEO of Meet Minneapolis, and have a timely discussion about how they're helping manage through the pandemic as it relates to our tourism, hospitality, and sports entertainment industries here in Minnesota. So if we were in person, we would give our guests a big round of applause. Thank you again for being with us this morning. We really appreciate it, and hope everyone else has a good Friday, and we will see you next month.
Thank you.